start, if I can, thank you, Steve, you do that well. Because we're behind schedule, I'd like to start, and next item on the agenda is golf. Roland's had to step out for a bit, so I've asked Joe to give us a brief summary of it, and then we'll move on to IT.
Yeah, he just informed me that he has a family matter unavoidable that he needs to attend to. However, the golf operation budget came in as requested, so they're at where they need to be. He will check in later and is hoping to present his budget if available. So at this time, I just ask that we progress to information technology.
And I guess we're waiting for Foster, is he coming up?
Yeah, he was notified, he's in the building.
It is a little weird. Oh my God. Anybody else we can go to? BJ.
Let's do that. Amy? Amy?
No. Megan?
You want to go ahead and talk about, we'll move you up since we're waiting for Foster?
Oh, see Megan. The new Amy. Pardon? Megan, it's the new Amy.
Megan, I'm sorry.
Hi.
There you go, Joe. Talk to us about health.
You wanted me to talk to you about health? You want me to talk to you about my budget?
Okay, point taken.
Oh, I'll come on Monday night to talk to you about health. So, differences between 20 and 21 proposed budget. Originally, I had requested an amount that was just shy of 5% greater than last year, or just over $5,000. That increase was mostly salary, full-time, part-time salaries, obligations through union contracts. Two other increases, very small increases, were within that budget. $460 was added to the health department budget for fuel, and that is new for 2021 because previously it was all encompassed in the community development budget. And then a $330 increase in dues, subscription, and travel was requested. We do have 2.5 staff members that require educational expenses, classes, licenses that need to be renewed, and those prices seem to go up every year. So I did present a 2% budget, and that budget has a reduction of $5,262. And in order to get there, I propose to reduce part-time salaries and wages by $3,256. Other purchase services from $6,900 to $6,000, reduction of $900, and a reduction in due subscription and travel of $1,094. The part-time salaries and wages, that position is a 19-hour per week position year-round. And for the last 5 or 6 months or so, that person has requested to be 14 hours a week rather than 19. So there's a bit of a surplus in hours. Reducing that permanently would affect our summertime ability to do seasonal inspections. Swimming pools, beaches, ponds, restaurants, we all know we explode in the summer, and that's when we need that extra day to cover all of those required inspections. Other purchase services, has traditionally been used for contractors to do witnessing of test holes. We also use it for health and wellness programs. Reducing that will require us to take on some abilities in-house, which will take away from our ability to do other things like reviewing building permits on a timely basis and responding to events like coronavirus or other types of events. Due subscriptions and travel, $1,000 reduction or just under 1,100 reduction. We should be able to cover our obligations. If we lose that money, we won't be able to attend as many educational offerings as we would prefer. But if we need to lose money, that's where I would prefer it come from. Top budgeting priorities for '21, salaries and wages. I would really rather not lose that money. We would like to be able to run efficiently, and last year we were short on time because of harmful algae blooms. The state requires us to do the posting and the monitoring for those, and I had proposed this year to add on a one-day-a-week employee using that extra money in the part-time salaries and wages in order to cover that program. That may not be able to be done. And if we had to defer some expenses, I would prefer them coming from purchase services and due subscriptions rather than part-time salaries and wages. Programs that we pay for out of those line items are a nutrition education program for kids and wellness programs. We purchase sunscreen dispensers for the beaches. That would be something that would have to stop if we didn't have that money. And due subscription and travel, like I said, we have 2 registered sanitarians, 3 soil evaluators, 2 Title V system inspectors, certified health officer, and a certified food manager, all required by our job descriptions to do our jobs properly. And all of those licenses require continuing education. So that's where that money goes. Recap of revenues. Last year, in the calendar year 2019, our revenue came to $154,713. That is up 12% over 2018. And I think most of that is due to a fee increase in 2018. So we did see a bit more of an increase, and I anticipate that to continue throughout 2021. We're not proposing any fee changes. I did want to make you aware, however, that the sewer connections, the Board of Health and the previous town administrator wanted to not charge a fee for that permit. That's going to cost us. It's going to take a lot of staff time and inspections, and if we're not getting a fee for that, we're not recovering that time. So taking money from other parts of my budget is going to be damaging. Any questions?
Thank you, Megan. Don, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, there's 2 ways of achieving what you were just talking about with the sewer hookups. I mean, the rationale was that we were already slamming everybody with, they've got to get at least a sanitarian, if that's where we go, or an engineer to do the hookups. They're going to have new flow expenses. If you hit the grinder pump sweepstakes, you have to buy that and a Generac and operate that. But I'm not certain, were we prohibited from using any part of the borrowing to offset hookup costs? And that would be what a hookup cost. I mean, it's associated with what you have to do to get the pipe out there.
I don't have an answer to that. It's a question I raised at our DHY meeting last week in terms of.
I bring it up because it's a way of making her whole without her taking the hit directly.
I don't think we are. I think we could roll some of that into borrowing, but I need to verify it.
We can look into that. I don't know how that would,
Because I don't know that anybody
Surplus my
expected you to
budget,
take the hit for the team here. It's just, it was a question of what it was doing to the consumers, not, you had to absorb it.
Michael?
I have no questions, thank you, Mayor.
Steve?
Just I think the vital services, and as we go through the rest of the budget, if we find ways to alleviate the burden on some of the departments that it doesn't appear really can afford to think ahead, this is one that we ought to think about, so.
I'm hoping we have a chance to look at some of this because, one of the things we're trying to do is protect our businesses in town. And we live in a highly regulated state, regardless of what we do in Harwich, and we have to be licensed, and we have to do these activities, so I want to be sure we provide those services, obviously. One, and in that regard, one that does concern me is the reduction in education training, because it's not only for you. I know I gave you a lot of applause some months ago because it turned out to be free, but providing some training for the committee as well, which is an important aspect to keep going, even if we have to spend some money, so I think we need to continue to look at that. Yeah, your turn.
Brian?
I have no questions.
John?
None for me, thank you.
Dana? Whoops, Angelo.
Just one question.
I hit him.
Excuse me. How much money would you need to replace some of the things you've taken out? What are you talking about?
we're talking a couple $1,000s for our contract services and do subscriptions and travel. In order to man the programs we would like to be able to do, that's where that $3,000 comes from.
How much? I'm sorry.
$3,000.
You're talking like $5,000-6,000 in total? Is that total?
Not even, yeah, $5,000 would make my budget whole.
I firmly agree that we should be looking for the $5,000 because this is an activity that is something we need, or hope we don't need, but we should have.
Dana?
I think the same way. I think that in the last presentation we just had, there was discussions about an event that we don't know if it's going to happen or not in terms of the town clerk's budget. I'd much rather take that over as a request from the finance committee later in the year if it does come to pass and make this budget whole. It seems like a real easy kind of thing to do. When you talk about what our function is as a government, protecting citizens is probably number one, even over public education and some of the other things we deal with. And inspections of restaurants and things like that are right at the top of that. So I'm going to support putting that money in no matter what anybody else does, so it's clear.
Agreed. It's just, you're in need, I don't want you are in need, so I think you need to be whole.
I don't think, in my own point of view, I don't think it makes sense to decide what these things ought to come from. I think, we gotta decide that, but we don't need to decide it today.
But we just had one discussion over the other, and of those two, they're about the same money. It's an easy kind of fix.
Thank you, Megan.
Hey, you're welcome.
Thank you.
We'll see you on Monday, you say, right?
See you Monday night.
Okay. Next on the agenda is information technology, and we are Foster.
Good afternoon. The IT budget does have some changes in it from the previous years, and they mostly involve how we're going to do support here. Whether the methodology will be staff or we contract it out. There's been quite a bit of discussion about adding staff and and we're currently looking into professional companies to provide additional support. I can go into some detail on that, and I guess maybe the thing to do first would be to cover the fixed items that I think we can get out of the way pretty quickly. In my budget, I have a line item for Munis, which stays pretty steady from year to year. It goes up, continually goes up by just normal inflation. Right now, it's at $76,000 for the next year. We have a similar support service for our permitting software from Acela. That is budgeted at $32,000 next year. The landline phones are in my budget, so those include trunk lines and copper lines. Surprisingly we have about 80 copper lines in town and a T1 line that does most of the main buildings. The cost for that is budgeted at $39,000 for next year. I have website support costs in my budget, although most of the day-to-day support for that has gone to the Channel 18 department. I have the budget item to pay the website provider. That is $7,500 this year. The internet services for Town Hall run about $3,000 here. The internet services that are in the outlying buildings are all paid for by the departments. The only costs we have directly for email right now, since we have our own server, are a filtering system where we send our email out to another company. That runs about $3,800 a year. Right now, our email is running on a paid-for system at the Public Safety Building, and so we don't have any year-to-year costs on that right now. And I have actually my largest budget items for hardware, software, computers, servers, networking, some switches that we're trying to add for virtualization. That budget item is about $90,000, and that number stays fairly steady year to year over the last few years. That pretty much covers my costs that seem to be pretty steady from year to year. Any questions on those?
You say that there's additional costs that's not steady?
The cost that we're going to talk about for support services, how, we've used a person, a company to come in and do services on an as-needed basis, particularly for public safety. And so those and the additional support staff that we're looking for.
Mark, any questions or comments?
No question.
Brian?
No question.
John?
Just one, from the budget reductions that were recommended by the town administrator, was an elimination of a position
Yes.
that was in your budget last year. And my understanding is you're a department of one, is that correct?
Yes.
And do other town departments in the town have anyone on their staff that does IT work in conjunction with you? Or do you handle all the department's IT needs and services for all the departments in town?
The public safety building or departments gets significant support from a couple people there. We're fortunate to have a fireman, lieutenant in the fire department who has a former IT career, and he picks up a lot of the load in that department. And he's very good at it, and but I know that they would, you know, like to claw that back a little bit, because it's quite a bit, it's a significant resource that goes from firefighting to IT, but also very valuable because he's familiar with their workload down there. Other than that, the on-staff services all come from me. You know, of course, each department has different levels of expertise. If they happen to have a person in there that's comfortable with doing things, they step up.
So by and large, though, you're the main person for IT issues and service and support for the whole town.
Yes.
And I know that position was, an assistant or some type of help was in there, and it was never filled for some reason. I'm not going to get into the reason to that, but we talk about services and things that we think we should find resources for to fund. I agree. I would think that a position to help you is a very important position. I do not know how long you intend to still stay in your capacity as an IT professional for the town, but that's concerning to me, that one person is in charge of the whole IT infrastructure for this town, and we hear so much about threats and vulnerabilities in the IT world. And I'm not an IT person, so I don't know, but it just strikes me that that position is solely understaffed at just one position there. So thank you for your support and to the help of the town.
I would like to ask a question. Is that all right? May I ask a question?
Yes.
So I'm curious, you are a team of one. I know, I have a fairly in-depth background in your work. I'm just curious, is the configuration, have you ever used volunteers? I mean, you have a highly educated group of people in this community. You're going to have Microsoft certified engineers that live in this community that retired. Do you utilize volunteer services to provide you with some degree of redundancy in crisis?
No, we have not sought any or had much of anybody come in to volunteer. I don't know how that would work out.
Sometimes it's just a matter of physical bodies. I mean, when you have a major crash, you have to bring a lot of systems up at once unless you're configured really differently. It's just a number of hands on deck. I was just curious if you had those assets available that you could bring in on a volunteer basis, because there is an awful lot of knowledge available in our community.
Yes, there is. But no, we have not utilized that.
That might be a way of considering some redundancy and also provide some buffer. Because, as I know well, everybody gets older, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to keep moving here. Angelo?
Excuse me. I agree.
Agree, yeah. Dana?
I agree too, but I would hate to see that burden be put on Foster to accumulate and organize and train a whole bunch of volunteers when he's doing everything now by himself. That would be a tremendous burden to put on him.
Tom?
Agreed. The only other resource that you might think about would be more of Mark's bailiwick down there at the tech.
Yeah.
That you could get, because I send kids out on co-op and job all the time, so, you know, if you get a high school kid to come on and learn them, you know, teach them the ropes, as it were, then I think that might help out. Maybe he'll stay on as you're phasing out. Maybe we'll get somebody to stay in.
Mark has brought that up to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the plug. Okay.
Now, this is a roughly, I'd call it a $75 million operation here, and we have one IT person who is, you know, constantly in danger of getting run over with cars out here and things like that, so might be time to start biting a big chunk of that opportunity as soon as we can. Okay, we're done.
Thank you, Jack.
Cheers.
Michael, I'll start with you.
This has obviously been a topic that we've talked about for at least the 5 years that I've been on the board.
Yep.
We did have a proposal from the county, who also did a analysis of where we were, and that report still sits. I don't think the board's really ever taken this back up, Larry, since we had that.
Yeah.
We certainly recognize a need for another IT person, or at least help for Foster, but I think we really need to start with that analysis, look at what the county has available. Cape Cod Regional Technical High School, and as Brian said, there's a lot of people in this community, I think, that would volunteer to help, so, but I think the board should take this back up, Larry, and in a year that we're talking about cutting our Board of Health, Council on Aging, and some of the other departments, I'm not sure that this is the year really. So I recognize and appreciate where Joe cut, because we have made it by, but we probably should take this back up.
Mark?
We should tie that into emergency response as well.
Jack has a good point. I think we'd all feel a lot more comfortable if we had one FTE that had two people in it, but we don't. We got one FTE that equates to one individual, and that one individual has a problem. We all have a problem. It's a $75 million operation,
Right.
thereabouts. It's a big mistake, because I know that going to the MMA, there was, I went to an IT vulnerability seminar. There are things that the government requires you to do if you wind up getting hacked, and they're time consuming. You have to tell people that they were subject to a hack. But one person doing everything is kind of unreasonable in terms of redundancy, because the week that Foster's not in is a real problem.
Thank you, Don.
I think I'm just echoing, I mean, it's obvious we need to address it, as Michael said, from the very beginning to the end here, and figure out how we might have a more robust approach here. So,
Can only agree. We need to take some more action on it. Okay, Foster?
thanks, Foster.
Thanks, Foster.
We have, I see we have our buildings up next, Ray?
He's kind of attached to it already.
I'm looking around, going, what the hell is that doing?
I finally realized this.
Thank you for taking the time to see me.
Thanks for coming in.
I'll be brief.
Okay,
Did you all get a copy of my, my notes, or?
we do. I'm just looking for them now.
Okay. Okay, I'll just go over them quickly. So basically, the building department is here to ensure compliance with the state building code and the town of Harwich zoning code. Primarily, that's our function. And just as a note here, the building department does not do design work, and we do not do project management or construction management work, although we're constantly asked to get engaged with that. We try not to. The building department is primarily funded by building permit fees and, to a lesser extent, local fees and taxes. And based on a meeting I had with the previous Board of Selectmen, I learned that there's a difference between taxes and fees. So, thank you, Don. So I did.
Are you sure he's right?
Right. So I did a little research on it myself to get up to speed, and there is some case law on what's the difference between a tax and a fee, and I've just listed it here, not to instruct anybody, but just to have it fresh in everybody's mind as we go. So the first adjustment that was proposed was removal of the demolition of condemned buildings. So this was a $10,000 item in the budget. I think it's more of an aesthetic curb appeal type of thing for the town, and it does have a safety element to it. I think it enhances the safety of the town to get rid of these attractive nuisances. That's all I can say about that. The building department has no real opinion on aesthetics in the town. We're about safety, not about aesthetics. And so we wouldn't have any problem having that item taken out of our budget. Although I will say from time to time, we do get some complaints from taxpayers of dilapidated property in their neighborhoods. And we try to address it as best we can, but we just can't go ahead and take things down without funding to do that. The next item is dues, subscriptions, and travel. This hits a little closer to home of what we do. And basically, it's made up of 3 items. One is to purchase code books and reference materials that are necessary to enforce the code, the state building code. And we've been given a free ride for the last few years in that the state couldn't really get their act together and couldn't come up with the necessary amendments to enact the 2018 codes. We're currently on the 2015 codes. So they've advised us that they are going to be ready January 1st, 2021, to enact the 2021 codes. So this will require a purchase of new code books to be compliant with what they prescribe. The next item it includes is continuing education, and this is required by license inspectors by the state, and also is mentioned in some of our collective bargaining agreements. And then the third thing is to subsidize transportation that's provided by the town. We currently have one vehicle that is kind of a specialty vehicle, a hybrid vehicle, and we use that vehicle for all the inspections we can use it for, and we use it, but we also use it for, and lend it to other departments for, we don't lend it, it's a community vehicle, but to do travel, off Cape and things that a more dependable vehicle is used for. And so we get by with one vehicle. We have about 4,000 plus in permits we issued a year, and between plumbing, gas, electrical, and building. And they all need inspections, and we try to have a very friendly inspection policy in which we do inspections the same day they're called in. As long as they're called in by 10 o'clock, we do the inspection that day, whenever possible. So if we eliminate, we do that by being able to subsidize the travel by using private vehicles and reimbursing people for the use of their vehicles. And so if we change that, we'll have to probably change the policy, and we'll be more of a transportation-based inspection team. So you would probably call in an inspection, and if we had transportation available, town transportation available, we would do the inspection. If not, we'd have to put you on a list, and we would do the inspection when we had transportation available to do it. So that's basically what these cuts do to us, and I'll happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you. I guess our turn. Steve?
So that would slow down the inspection times?
Yes, it would probably slow down the inspection time. And I will say it'll slow it down mostly for the people that are paying for it through the fees. This would be the builder community. And so it's important to them to have inspections in a timely fashion.
I know that.
Okay.
Well, obviously, here again, we need to kind of look at, what we're doing with the budget relative to how it's going to affect the services the town provides, so. I think we'll, as we go on, continuing to discuss the budget, we'll have to take a look at it.
Can I just follow up quickly, Don, for you? In terms of this portion of what you talked about, budget cuts, for the subsidized, fees, how much are you talking about?
Well,
Especially the subsidized-
we had a budget of about a little over 15,000, and they took $10,750 out, so we're left with about $4,000 in the budget. A lot of that will be used just for code books, to purchase code books. These books are not inexpensive
How much has to
by
go-
design.
How much has to go back in to maintain this? That's
Well, we'd
nice.
like to see the entire amount brought back in, and maybe we could find some other places to look at. I talked about perhaps the bulk fuel, and you know, if you think about it, well, if we're using a fuel-efficient vehicle, are we really calculating that correctly? Maybe we could take another look at that. It's not a lot of money, but it's little places you could. And I don't know if some of our costs in this budget might be doubled up with Foster's cost. So for instance, we're trying to use the software system that we have, the Excel software system, as much as we can, and we have some iPads that we want to give to plumbing, gas, and electric, and integrate them into the Excel system. Right now, they're just on separate spreadsheets and that type of thing. And so we think it would be a good step forward to do that, but you could eliminate some money there too.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ray, you raised two issues that I'd like to go back over. One is the fees. I mean, you sat down with me and Chris, and the biggest difference was you were basing the original increases on, well, Yarmouth charges this, or Barnstable charges that, and we got back to focusing on how much does it cost you?
Right.
And are you covering your expenses?
Well-
And my question first is, what did the fee recovery look like this year?
So, right now, we're a little bit ahead of expense, as far as fees is concerned. The last year that we have full numbers is 2019.
Okay.
And so in 2019, and I don't want to mislead anybody, but in 2019, we had a little over $600,000 in revenue, fee revenue. And we had a little over $300,000 in raw cost. But those aren't fully loaded costs, so not everything is put into that. And I don't have daily access or even monthly access, any access to all of the numbers that go into that. So I work with Carol to get to those numbers. But I think it's a reasonable, I think we made a reasonable assumption at this time as far as fees versus taxes.
Yeah, well, I raised that issue because, I mean, this is not just a quality issue, it's a quantity issue. I mean, if indeed you're pushing out inspections because you don't have the money, how much money is that? And it should be folded into your fee structure to keep that static, because we look at both revenue and expenses.
Correct.
Let me move to the second one, though.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say this politely, but looking at the car situation out there, in terms of whenever I've seen it completely empty, all of our town cars are out, it happens probably less frequently than somebody who was born on leap year has a birthday. It just doesn't seem like all cars are out all the time. What are we doing? Are we running an aggregate of 4 cars or 5 cars or whatever number of cars and assigning them, or is that a pool operation?
Well, it's not a pool operation. The historic use of the cars is that each department was given a car to use, and they're marked. And so we have taken some steps we have generally, we have 2 full-time inspectors and 2 part-time inspectors. The plumbing, gas, and electric are part-time inspectors. So when we have certain days of the week, we have 4 inspectors needing vehicles for transportation. And we cover that, like I said, through the use of private vehicles, and we reimburse the mileage. And we, most of the time, can borrow a car from Donna in assessing. And so we use her car, usually on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And she's usually okay with that. The other town vehicles, I have to say we don't have a motor pool. I did work for Dennis that did have a motor pool, and it was not a very satisfactory arrangement, in my opinion. It was handled by administration, and it wasn't practical in the fact that you had to reserve a car, usually a week or two in advance. But you never know what your load is going to be that far in advance. And you didn't reserve it, you had to reserve it by a certain amount of time. So you'd have it for the morning, or you'd have it for 6 hours, or whatever you, and then thought you needed it for. But then if you didn't use it, you were, I can't say punished, but you weren't, you didn't make any points by
I
not using
get
it.
that, but that's just a mechanism. If we're
Yep.
talking about lowering our response time to do inspections, and I'm still seeing a car or two sitting out there lying idle, that doesn't match up, regardless of what process is used to assign the cars. It just doesn't, to me, it just doesn't make any sense to, cut service levels based on the lack of money for mileage when you got cars that aren't being used.
Well, we need a method to,
I think we need
I
to
guess,
look
to
at that.
manage it. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there's ways around, there's other ways to do this. Although I do think that probably the most efficient way, maybe not the least expensive way, but the most efficient way, is the way we're doing it now. But that's what I'm used to, so.
Michael?
Don asked both my questions, but to the vehicle point, I agree. Those cars sit in that parking lot a lot, and I have to believe between the department heads that all work upstairs and the town administrator, we can come up with a way that we can actually use those cars and not delay inspections to the public. The budget, I don't think all budget cuts have to be related to taking away from the public. We also heard at the beginning of the meeting from the police department that they have 3 vehicles parked down back, registered to emergency services, so there's an extra 3 cars that sit behind the police department that I think we could probably use. On the fees, we significantly increased most fees last year.
Yes.
We haven't come up with enough of a difference in money to pay for in the next budget cycle, to pay for books and travel. We didn't raise.
Oh, yeah, we had it in there, but it's been taken out. It's been proposed to be taken out.
The 20,000.
Well, no, the 10,750.
The revenue or the expense?
So the expense he's trying to take out, but what was the increase in revenue? Just the 10,700?
No, I'm not understanding. the
So
question.
how much revenue was increased by the fee changes that the board voted last year?
So we increased, I think we put in for around 59%
Yeah.
increase. And we, I think, increased it pretty close to that, a little bit under that, but in that neighborhood.
So what is that dollar amount, the 59% increase in the fees? What did that bring in for money?
We had it at the time. I can't remember right now what the actual dollar amount was.
Most likely more than 10,700?
FY '19, for building inspections, it was just under $400,000. So that was a pretty significant increase. There was some one-time expenses in there, one-time revenue sources, I believe, in there. And that had to do with a new high school that's being built. So we would need to take into account those one-time revenue sources.
I guess I'd just like to see what the increase in the revenue was versus what we're asking for a decrease, and then understand why it's gonna take away services.
We haven't recognized that revenue, though, for this year. Yet, the DOR hasn't certified that revenue number.
So it was about a $120,000 increase.
So that ought
That ought to cover it.
Well, the fundamental question is, have we reduced your budget more than than the increase in revenues from the fee increases that going to other departments?
You've reduced our budget from last year. is what's happened. So we based our revenue increase on our current budget. But if we're reducing the budget, I don't know if we reduce revenue too, you know? If we reduce fees, I'm not sure how to calculate it.
Let's take another look at this.
If we could ask Carol to look at the fees, the generation of more money by the increased fees versus these budget cuts, I'd just like to see the numbers.
Superficially, it almost appears like we've reduced your expenses greater than the revenues coming in,
Well,
which we don't want to do. If we're charging fees, it should cover the expenses.
right.
But I agree with Michael, let's have a look at it and find out. You're gonna
Okay,
say-
so I'm a little puzzled here, because I don't know what our total expenses are. I only know what the building department
Right. No, fair
actual
enough.
expenses are. So there's other expenses that have to, because the building department is supported by other aspects here in town that have to get added into the expense number to get an accurate
Right.
picture of what, you know, fee revenue is versus expenses.
Okay, thank you, Ray.
Okay.
Jack?
Who's down there? Brian?
Yes, I don't have any questions, thank you.
Mark?
No questions.
John?
Hi, Ray.
Hi.
I got a couple quick, again, clarification questions. How many people are in your department, full-time or equivalent employees?
There are 2 inspectors full-time.
Full-time.
And 2 part-time inspectors, 1 electrical part-time and 1 plumbing and gas part-time.
So that's 4 people then? I mean, the 2 inspectors, yourself, and the 2 part-timers?
Yes, but we also receive clerical support from the community development budget.
Okay. Well, 4 or 5, whatever, 4 or 5 employees plus support staff.
Yeah.
Just totaling your revenues in here, your local receipts from, to the actuals from, to Michael's point, for FY19, your receipts are $613,000.
Yes.
You know, that's clearly, you're taking a lot more revenue than your salary positions and stuff, so,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and I don't know where you draw that split. Originally, I used to think it was a 75-25 split, meaning 75% fee revenue, 25% tax revenue. But now I think it's more like 90-10.
And it's hard to see in the budget detail, which is really great detail, because you were put in with community development. There was, you know, the conservation was in there, planning, community development was in there, building and health department. So it's hard to see all the exact costs associated with your department.
Right.
But my gut instinct says you clearly, excluding employee benefits, that's a whole different story, but just as far as salary, wages, and expenses, you cover your costs.
Well, on that particular year,
Yeah.
yes. Now, you have to keep in mind that the revenue is based on the mix of permits. So
Sure.
if we're doing a lot of big commercial projects, which this revenue reflects the tech school and some other major projects in town. So it's,
Carol says one time.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Ray.
Okay, Angelo?
Yeah, I think asking Carol to figure out what would have to happen to the fees to generate $20,000 next year would be a good idea. Because it strikes me, based on the $600,000 and whatnot, that it's not a big number.
Yeah, it's a small number. I
And
think.
that being a number, we put it in now, we actually will make a few dollars more between now and the end of this year. And I think that'd be very helpful.
Dana?
All set?
Tom?
Well, just a couple, like, you know, one-time expenses, but then again, code books. Electrical code book comes out every 3 years. So you need to buy 1 code book every 3 years. That's not a major expense to my look. I'm an electrician, I buy them, I know what they cost.
Right.
But also, the other thing that's hitting me is you have this user-friendly, which is very good to get an inspection the same day you call for. That's wonderful. It very rarely happens. But if you have part-time inspectors, then how do they respond if it's not their day in?
They respond, they do it the days that they're in. They can't do it the days
So
they're
if I
not.
call on Wednesday and I'm ready, but he's not in till Thursday, so I'm
Yeah.
still waiting a day?
Yeah, and most of the electrical and plumbing and gas contractors and people doing that work understand that. So, yeah, we can only do it when they're in.
Okay, so I'm just saying, so it's not, doesn't have to be every day you need, you know, to get them rushing to the job and inspect?
No,
You could-
correct, but what happens here is if we don't have the transportation available, so for instance, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, all 4 inspectors need transportation. On Monday, 3 inspectors need transportation. On the other 2 days, only 2 inspectors need transportation. So that's just the way it's historically been set up to do.
Some way to make a schedule maybe somehow,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, there's things to look at there, I'm not saying there isn't.
I'm all set.
Okay, thank you, Ray.
All right,
Thanks, Ray.
thanks, yep.
Thank you.
Next up is the cemetery. Hi, Robin.
Oh, paperwork. Thank God.
Thank you, Rob.
It's handing out.
Thanks.
Obviously, we don't have enough.
Like we can read.
I think we got an arboretum, we gotta need more trees here. Thank you.
Slow down, Tom.
Oh, we got that. I got part of it. Called the land.
Robin Kelly, Cemetery Administrator. Should I just go through the questions real quickly?
Yep.
So what's different? We are asking for a part-time employee to cover when I'm out, to be paid out of the cemetery revolving account. We have already talked to Carol Coppola, and we submitted some information to the union, to them to look over the job description, and they have approved the job description as written. So then, what are the increases or decreases? In our, I made a little spreadsheet for you guys on our expenses, which is on the second page, as you can tell. Our dues, travel, and subscription, mostly the travel was impacted by negative 31.36%. We have found out through talking with Carol Coppola that we will be able to take that out of our cemetery revolving account, so we're okay with that reduction. I already explained that we are trying to add another person to my office. I'm the only one that's in. This past year, I was diagnosed with Lyme's disease and was in the hospital, and while I was in the hospital, I was answering phone calls about people getting buried in the cemeteries. So really feel it's important for some type of office coverage for me, whether I'm on vacation or ill. So revenues, with our cemetery revolving account, we are expected to take in about $60,000 from lot sales. That's a little conservative at this point. And that's about it. So I attached the cemetery revolving account, actual numbers so far for this year. At the beginning of the year, we had $72,709. With the passing of the Arboretum software, we reserved that $30,110 out of that. So when you come down to the last page, available in the cemetery revolving currently is $53,483. So, do you have any questions?
I forget who, Mike, I guess we'll start with you.
Just a thought.
Okay,
You were based out of the DPW department until 2 years ago?
yeah, about 3 years
When,
ago.
when you were at the DPW, did you have office support from the office support staff that's at the DPW?
Occasionally, yes.
Okay, so why was that change made?
They needed me to move out of the DPW building because they had a new, Sean Libby was hired, and he took my office. So then I was relocated to the community center.
I just think as far as cost savings measures, Joe, maybe that's something that we could look at. It seems that the DPW does their maintenance on all the cemeteries, and it seems like the departments are commingled. Now we're looking at hiring somebody else when we may already have the support staff. Other than that, I have no questions. Thank you,
Okay.
Robin.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to go with this in a slightly different direction, but it comes at the same point.
Okay.
How long have you been a full-time position?
I think I've been full-time for, and I'm not sure, 7 years, something like that.
Okay.
I've been at the town since 2004, though.
The point is that we've had cemeteries for like
Right. But when I first
hundreds of
started
years.
at,
What would have happened prior to that 7 years? I mean, there was coverage.
right,
And
so
I'm
when I,
presuming it was because of the way Michael was talking about it.
so when I first started this job, we were doing about 40 burials a year. Currently, with our aging population, we're up to about 100 burials a year. We are selling more lots now than we ever sold before. So, I mean, just as each year goes and the town expands more each year, the demand for this department is going to increase. We sell lots pretty much every week. People are coming here to do genealogy, so I'm meeting with families, helping them find their old family plots. I'm pretty busy.
No, I'm not saying you're not filling up the time.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that there's been, we've had jurisdiction over cemeteries for hundreds of years.
That is correct.
And it got done, and the position is now full-time, and it was part-time. But before I'd look at an additional person, I'd want to look at additional ways of making it whole if you're not there.
Michael? you had
I
another
actually just forgot to mention it, and I wanted to thank you for the Arboretum project. I think you did a wonderful job with that. And
Thank you.
clearly, you're doing more than just selling lots.
Steve?
Yeah, I mean, I think the demands have increased. Years ago, I don't want to say how many, I mowed the cemeteries. And my brothers did as well as a summer job, and Joe Baker ran the cemeteries. And Joe had a gas station, and he repaired all the mowers and basically charged the town virtually nothing for it. He had a base set salary that he got, and in the winter, he plowed the roads and the cemeteries, and it was a different world back then.
So you're going to fill in.
So, yeah, I'm going to fill in. So, you know, I mean, obviously, the demand has changed, as Robin has indicated
And
clearly.
we've taken over quite a few cemeteries. We took over Pine Grove. We've done 4 expansions to the cemeteries. We went from maintaining 48 acres to maintaining 100 acres. So the increase in the cemetery property itself since 2004 is doubled.
Just one quick question. When you do use money out of the revolving fund, that's voted on by the commissioners, the cemetery commissioners or trustees, right?
Well, it is, and it also, we'd have to change the language if we're going to pay a part-time employee out of the revolving account. So it would have to go to town meeting
Okay.
to get approved anyways by the, at town meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Mark?
No question.
Brian? John?
Hey, Robin.
Hi, John.
How many lot sales did we have last year?
So, how many lot sales in total? I can tell you what I've brought in so far this year in lot sales is $40,000.
And a lot is what, 1,100?
It's $800 per grave space if you're a Harwich resident, $900 if you're a Don resident.
Okay, I can do the math on that. And then, so if a person buys a lot, where do they go to buy the lot? They don't come and search you out, do they?
Yes, they do.
They do? They go to the community center?
So they give me a call, I ask them what cemetery they're interested in. So it's either gonna be Evergreen, Island Pond, Mount Pleasant, Pine Grove, North Harwich. So then they tell me which cemetery they're interested in, I bring down my maps, we would do a walking. I just met with Dawn this week.
I'm planning it.
So, I've
Can we
sold a
help
lot
in
to
that?
Angelo, so you walk around, you show them, it's almost like real estate. What would you know, where do you wanna be?
So you take reservations then, huh?
Some people you meet 2 or 3 times, some people can make a decision the first day.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just, I don't know the mechanics of your
Right.
department. I don't know if they go into the town clerk and paid for the lot there and took it,
Right.
whatever. But, and then how's your ground penetration radar business going?
Actually, some guy called me yesterday about the ground penetrating radar.
And what
He says,
revenues do we generate from that?
We haven't done any of that recently. Somebody is doing a huge project in Eastham, and they called me yesterday and asked me if I would be interested in partaking and helping somebody with their master's degree finish up their a survey down there. I really don't have enough time to do that. I've been asked 3 or 4 different times from different communities to do it. It's usually a 1 or 2 day thing, and I have to travel to wherever I'm going with it. I just don't have time to do it. I did take in a lot of, the machine is already paid for. We paid for that a long time ago. I think we made $20,000 the first year we got it. So I mean, if I had more assistance,
more
maybe
help.
I could do more of that work.
Thank you, Robert.
Angela?
Just a question. It seems to me that the budget that you put in is agreed to, except.
Yes, I'm agreeing to the reduction, because I can use the revolving account.
Well, then I would think it'd be a good idea to examine how to go forward with the cemetery department. Does it get moved? Does it get another hire? But I don't think it's needed to be done prior to town meeting.
Right, well, if it was, if we changed the language in the revolving account to say that we could have a part-time employee, at least the language would be in there. If we get the part-time employee or not, at least it would be in there if it ever happened that I needed to hire someone, even if it was for 10 hours a week. It wouldn't have to be for the 19 that we're recommending. And the total cost for the part-time employee would be $22,000.
Dana?
I don't have any questions on the budget. I am glad to see you fix the rules finally for the
Yeah.
cemetery. and,
Thank you.
They'll be coming forward and much new and
Dana
improved.
assisted with those rules, so.
If Steve want to change
I'm good, thank
more
you.
rules, can she say,
I just want to say, nicely run operation, and you're a very creative person. And so you need to find a mentor to help you be creative and effective at all the same time.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Robin.
Okay,
We'll call it a day.
Thanks,
All right.
Robert.
thank you.
Let's see, next up is the Community Center.
Hi, everyone. How y'all doing?
Take care.
Great.
My budget is down 1.94% from FY '20. Thank you, and have a good day. Maybe not.
Actually, I like the direction you're going, though.
I can't go any further, I'm sorry, but
No, I mean, they're quick.
I'm ready. I'm happy. So I am down 1.94%, which is almost the 2%. And if we're allowed to will, I would will my 2% to the Council on Aging and make me an even 2%. So keep that in mind. Happy to answer your questions. I'm not requesting any additional staff. I do remind you that we have no coverage for sick or vacation time. I don't know what else. I'm trying to get as fast as I can. What do you want to know? We do need a fully funded budget. I have already cut it. I was very ruthless when I went through it and took out any place I could. I also used some of the numbers from the actual budgets that we spent in FY19. And much like the library did, we did also have some savings because we have put in Rise Engineering and things like that. So those are reflected in this budget. It's not all me. I had some help taking it out. We can't defer any expenses. The main source of revenues for the budget were our program fees, passport fees, building use, and the community center weight room. We are not currently looking to change any of the fees. We did follow the method that Don had set up before. Our fees for the weight room, for instance, are meeting the cost of that. And we do give 25% of our revolving fund goes back to the general fund, so. I think those are all the questions, but happy to answer anything. The community center services over 10,000 people a month. We host the Council on Aging, Youth and Recreation, Channel 18, the Veterans Affairs, and the Cemetery Committee. About 74%, and I'm saying that off the top of my head, is heat, light, and electricity, so there's not a lot of room to cut there. We did put in the switches that will shut off automatically. Sometimes that's a good thing and sometimes it's not, but we're going with it. So that's my budget in a nutshell. I'm trying to get you back on track.
Thank you, Carolyn. Jack, I'll.
Should I go now?
You do it first.
Almost.
I don't want to say a word. Afraid of.
And we don't want to hex anything, so we're not going to say a word.
I like it. I love that answer.
I will keep my mouth shut and let's move on.
Dana?
I'm glad to see the emergency at the community center has passed for the day.
It has passed for the day, but for those of you who don't know, when I left earlier, we have a generator that we'll probably be visiting the finance committee for, so we are without electricity. But we're not talking about that today.
Put it in negotiated budget.
just
No, it's been on the capital plan forever, so, but Sean will do a full report, but we did get it, and I do appreciate everyone, especially the Council on Aging, who really pitched in to get, we have a large owl show with 200 people going on over there, so.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, it's an interesting place to work. It's never a dull day.
Angelo? John?
Just a quick question. I forgot up at the Owl Show. Nothing to do with anything, but I was out to dinner last night with a couple of senior citizen ladies, and they were talking about town stuff, and they said, John, what's the status of the pool at the community center?
What?
And I said, I think that's a long dead issue to the ladies, and they said, well, find out. So I know the community center was initially built with a pool in mind. Because I have to report back to these two ladies.
Sure.
A guesstimate of what a pool would cost to put in there? I'm not advocating for one, I'm just responding back to two people.
It's upwards of $10 million.
Okay, that's a good answer.
And we do have the plumbing. We never say no, but in this fiscal climate,
Yeah.
it would not be responsible for me to even bring that forward right
But it would be about 10 million if we had.
About 10 million. That was the last time I did the research on it,
Okay.
and I do have some of that.
No, I was
but
just curious. Great,
10
thank you,
million.
Karen.
That would include the locker rooms and things down in the basement,
Okay.
which are required to do. Also, I am not certified, nor do I believe Eric is, but he can tell you, to be in charge of a pool. It does require a whole different degree, so,
That even answers it even more.
yes, it would
Thank you.
require quite a bit of staff.
Brian?
Yes.
I have no questions, but you guys do a great job. Another
Oh,
valuable
thank you.
resource. It gives Harwich just a wonderful face.
Thank you.
Invaluable.
Mark?
Are there any tickets available for the 2 p.m. show?
If you pass this budget, I'll get you.
Done.
Dana?
2000, the selectmen did have a pool study committee that was
Right.
active and hasn't been active since.
Didn't go anywhere.
2000, 2001, if you want to consider that.
Costs were all.
Should I be concerned about item number 4?
I don't know what item.
You're on your,
Let me run to item number 4, I'm sorry.
that's cemetery? Okay, never mind.
I'm gonna say no, then you shouldn't be concerned.
Thanks, Caroline.
Are you done with me?
I am.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Thanks.
Forever.
I'm sorry. Carolyn, I forgot my whole, the Board of Selectmen here.
Tried. I tried.
My board too, that's great. I'm one of you.
How may I help you?
You better start with Don, he's the one that jumped out of his seat.
I would have let it go.
Yeah, well, you could have gone, but I'm not going to let John's statement go out there dangling. As luck would have it, my grandmother worked for a pool in Westchester County that was run by the county. And I got to tell you, the cost of building it is just the entry fee.
Yeah.
Chlorine is caustic. The pipes were constantly being swapped out. It was being remade every 3, 4, 5 years. Then you have lifeguards and certifications. So don't be beguiled by even that little $10 million figure, because it's going to be much more than that to keep it running. That's why God created the YMCA.
In the Atlantic Ocean.
I take that back, don't start with Don.
Michael?
No, nothing, thank you.
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Thank you.
I'm fine. I tried to get you out of here, but
And you
I
do a
tried
terrific
to.
job.
Thank you, everyone.
Gotta
Thank you.
leave now, leave.
Council on Aging. Richard, are you Council on Aging or Emily?
Conservation is next.
Conservation, I'm sorry.
That's something.
I should be able to read. It's getting later.
Bye.
I can't forget you, Amy.
Oh, I can't forget you all either. I had provided people with copies of a letter as well as answers to budget questions. Does anybody want a paper copy? I have extras.
Yes, please.
Unless you can replant it, I'll take one, so.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
And they're also in the packet.
Great.
Oh.
I think Dana might.
Here, I'll take it.
I got it.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Okay.
Give us a high point, Amy.
Sure, I will. Amy Usowski, Conservation Administrator for the town. Our budget came in at 5.43% higher than normal, and that was due to contractual salaries and wages. We have 2 full-time staff persons, down from 2.5 a couple of years ago. But the contractual salaries and wages due to step increases and the cost of living as per our contract did bump us up to 5.43%. So in order to get to the 2.5%, all that had to come out of expenses. Our expenses were only $11,774. So to take out what we needed to in order to get down to that 2.5%, it was $5,650 that would have had to come out of our expense budget. We have a few items that we really can't control in our expense budget. Town garden plots, for an example, which the Conservation Department runs. We take in between $2,000 and $3,000 a year in plot fees, but that money does go into the general fund. However, we are charged, it's approximately $3,000 a year is what our water bill is. We already have plots for this entire next year booked up. So that would leave my department with about $2,650 essentially to function with the entire year. With that money, we manage over 1,000 acres of conservation land. We take care of the town garden plots. We do have a town vehicle that we share, and more than happy when we're not using it to share it with others. We pay for dues subscriptions and in-state travel. We belong to the Mass Association of Conservation Commissions and go to a number of other job-related trainings. Most of all, our biggest expense is property-related services, which is for paying for tilling our town gardens, maintaining our conservation areas. It's basically paying for tools, safety equipment. We do borrow an awful lot already from the highway department. We really do pride ourselves in being as fiscally responsible as we possibly can be. So reducing by $5,650 would really be very, very difficult and for our department to be able to do that. Understanding that we want to contribute somehow to this, I have a couple of little proposals for you I wanted to run by you. We do have a revolving account. I'll start off by saying that. We have a revolving account for wetlands. A portion of our filing fees for people who have to go in front of the Conservation Commission goes into this wetlands revolving account. That is particularly to uphold the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and town bylaw. Very specific uses for that. We could, instead of paying for our dues subscriptions and in-state travel, which is $765, we could potentially take that out of wetlands. Let me add and say that we right now are capped at $6,000 a year to be taken out of that account by the Board of Selectmen. We have about $33,000 in there. So, and I think part of the reason there might have been a cap was before my time here that line item ran into the red. And we definitely are in the positives now. Instead of during the recession, we were taking in $4,000 to $5,000 a year. We're taking in $10,000 to $12,000 a year. So potentially, if we could talk about raising that, that limit a little bit, that would certainly help us too, in terms of, you know, being able to take our dues subscriptions and take it out of there instead of general fund. Other supplies, we have a budget of $300. We can absorb that in our budget that we have for properly rated services out of the 4,000. And I hate to say it, we could cut our Arbor Day seedling program if we absolutely had to. We look at what's necessary, and that's a nice thing that we provide for the citizens of the town. Right now, we're asking for $930. In the past, it's been $750. I'm happy to go down to $750. It's a nice thing, but is it a necessary, critical thing for our department? Not necessarily. I would still love to be able to provide that for people. We provide over 400 shrubs for a measly few $100s for people. Just a nice thing that we're able to provide to the citizens of the town. So we've also reduced by, instead of hiring Mass Audubon to do our shorebird monitoring, we hire in-house. Mass Audubon wanted to raise our rates up to $20,000 a couple years ago. We said we can do it in-house for less than $5,000, and we did. So I would love to see us level fund our expenses, but I understand that might not be possible, so I wanted to give you a couple of ideas where we could do so. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Amy. Steve?
Here again, this looks like a tough area where we're cutting, and I'm not sure it creates that much value relative to the budget. So I think this is one we just have to think about as we continue to go through these budgets and figure out where we're actually going to make the real cuts.
Don?
I hate to disagree, but we asked for the cuts. So, I mean, if we said to everybody that came in, that's fine, we could restore you, but not everybody else. So eventually we get to the point where we're back where we started from. I mean, I don't anticipate this will be a forever thing, but Michael's been pointing out for the last couple of years, it's been like a runaway train in terms of the overall growth of the budget. It's been astounding if you look at it over 15 years. So, unless something is particularly egregious, I'm not really, I'm not willing to move off of what our own message was.
Michael?
I have nothing, thank you. Look forward to working on this, and thanks for the suggestions, Amy.
I'm sorry.
Amy, I have a question for Joe. We had a position in Amy's budget that you put on hold. Is that still in the budget?
That would be the shorebird monitor. I don't believe that was cut in the fiscal year '21. Again, it's impacted by the hiring freeze because of this process.
And so we could fill that position based on the budget numbers now?
I just want to confirm I'm not, yeah, we still have the funding in fiscal year '21, so that is something we can proceed to.
Okay.
And
that doesn't affect the budget?
that's going to be one of the
that we're
items I have for follow-up items at the end of this process today.
Okay.
Is talking about some of the unilateral decisions that I've made while you folks go through this process, and then what we can
We come back to
consider
that.
Okay. Correct.
So we can
Yep.
possibly move on that one, Amy.
Thank you. That was actually what I forgot to mention that I wanted to.
Okay. I think it merits some further discussion because we're not talking big money, but I'm a little concerned, I take our point, but I'm a little concerned with our regulatory agencies that can stop businesses and economic development and, you know, people's, whether it's building inspections and so on, so we need to be careful. My only point. Jack?
Mark?
No questions.
Brian?
So I have a question, and I apologize if you said it and I missed it. I was looking for backup when you were speaking. The community garden expense, do you generate enough revenue to make that cash flow positive? Do you cover your expenses?
We used to. We are pretty close or slightly under at this point. When Chatham opened their community garden, a few people who we usually had from Chatham, because we don't care what town you're from necessarily, left, and now we don't have a completely full garden plots anymore, so we're a little bit under. And I am hoping to increase our fees in the next year or so, so we can get level again. It's not a money-making thing, but we also want to just make sure we're not losing money on it.
How much wattage is available?
Each plot, there's two different sizes. There's a regular traditional plot, which is at minimum 20 by 20 feet. And we have raised beds actually as well for people who might not physically be able to manage such a large plot, and those are only $15 a year. And so that should cover water and tilling. We clean it. We have a lot of people in town who also help clean it, so.
Did you get yours, Brian?
Just one quick, the shorebird position, that's the state mandated position?
We are mandated to do the monitoring. How we do it is really up to the towns. In the past, we hired Mass Audubon to do that. And it's not just the monitoring, you have to do a lot of reporting as well. So the position we used to be charged by Audubon about $5,000 in order to do that. John Rendon and I kind of co-managed that line item, which, by the way, that used to be under his budget. So another reason my budget is a little bit up is because that moved over to conservation. That's about $6,000. Audubon really wanted to up their rates, anywhere between $12,000 to $20,000 a year. So we took that over. We hired in-house and trained a shorebird monitor to do that for us last year.
Okay,
So
but it is state mandated.
It's state mandated to do the monitoring. Failure to do the monitoring could result in not opening our beaches, and it could have severe impacts. If we can't monitor them, can't put the machines on the beach to rake the beaches, could impact ability to open beaches, such as Red River.
Great, thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
It strikes me that the recommendation that you made to get down to the budget level is fine and is covered with money that exists, right?
What I've proposed does not get us down the 5,000 or so dollars that would get me to the 2.5%. What was proposed, my budget, which was proposed, this was by administration at your direction, cut more than I agreed to, but on the other hand, I understand where it's coming from. What I'm proposing is not to get to 2.5%.
Okay.
Dana?
I guess I'm confused now.
I heard it
I'm
wrong.
sorry.
What's the total amount of money that would get you through the year so that you're comfortable instead of being uncomfortable? Just as
Okay,
a number.
so the proposal from administration was to reduce the conservation expense budget by $5,650. For me to be comfortable, let me do some quick math here real quick.
Be comfortable. Sorry.
Close to comfortable.
2,000.
Okay, thank you.
I'm good, thank you.
Excuse me,
You all set?
did I mishear
You all set?
that you said that you could charge things to a certain other account?
Yes, I took that into account for the dues subscriptions and in-state travel for wetlands, because going to those workshops would directly be able to be covered under the wetlands revolving
That
account.
doesn't cover it, take it all out,
I put that into my 2,000 figure.
so that it covers everything.
Yes. We would still be able to provide that for myself and the commissioners if we were to take it out of wetlands. But in the future, I'd like to have discussion about raising that bottom line of $6,000 out of that revolving account a little higher.
Well, I think now's the time to have that discussion. when we
Okay.
have it as a,
That's what I,
Sweet.
agenda item.
that's what I thought you were trying
Okay,
to do.
I wasn't sure if this was
Because if you
the
can do
place
that,
today to do that.
Amy, was the, that $2,000 number, can that all be taken out of that account, or no? Only the
No.
wetland stuff?
It only can be for Wetland Protection Act related purposes.
What's the dollar amount on that out of the 2,000?
765.
Thank you. And then when was the budget change where John Rendon gave you the $6,000 line?
Last year.
Okay,
That's
This FY, this past year.
thank you.
that's a key component.
Thank you.
give it back to John.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Amy.
Can you take this? Materiality. Big money that matters, a little tiny money that doesn't matter.
Okay, now we're council on aging, Richard. I tried to get you up earlier.
You're the one that can hit the weak arm. You can hit the weak arm.
But they didn't let me get away with it.
Well, I could hit that, that's true.
How many more groups do we have?
You might be.
Good afternoon, Emily Mitchell, Council on Aging Director, joined by our board chairman, Richard Waystack, and I'm very thankful that I think pretty much our full board is here in the audience, so a thank you to them for their support in this process, and in every other way that they support the department and our seniors. I think I'll just briefly start with the changes I proposed to the budget when I made my initial requests, and then I'll go through kind of the impact of the proposed reductions in the interim administrator's proposed budget. So when I initially proposed the budget, the total increase was 3.5%, 3.84% increase in salaries and wages. Of that increase, 99.5% was contractual. Half of 1% was something that I had latitude over. I proposed a two-step increase for our primary van driver. So we have 3 van drivers in our transportation program. Our primary driver drives 20 hours per week. He's been with the department the longest, since 2016, and he's the lowest paid of our drivers. So I proposed a two-step increase for him. That would take him to the top step, which is about $23 an hour. So it's not a significant dollar amount, and it's at $20 per week. The difference between a one-step increase and a two-step increase for the full fiscal year is about $1,000. The other area of latitude in my salary and wages request was in budgeting for our vacant Wednesday van driver position. So that position has been vacant since September. We are finalizing the hiring process now. I did budget for a top step for that person. We do compete with other councils on aging and the RTA to retain qualified drivers. So this was to maximize our ability to hire and retain the best applicant for this position. So that was the salary and wages increase. For our expenditures budget, my proposed increase was 1.84%, and that was attributable to a couple of things. Our copier and maintenance line item, we lease our copier machine, and we have been having overages from our leased amounts for printing. We do share that copier with the cemetery department and with the veterans agent. I don't believe either of their budgets have any copier line items, so I would propose that either they absorb some of that cost or that we're able to implement that increase to that line item. I proposed an increase to our professional tech services line item. That line item is used only to subsidize Harwich residents who attend the Orleans Adult Day Health Program. That is a social day program in Orleans for folks with Alzheimer's, dementia, or other cognitive or physical decline. We subsidize that cost at $20 per Harwich resident per day. So folks may attend 5 days a week, they may attend only 1 day a week, but it's really an invaluable service to the people who attend and provides needed respite to caregivers. We've seen a really dramatic increase in attendance in that program. In the last page of the standard answer appendix, I showed the month-to-month cost between fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20. The average increase in attendance between fiscal year 19 and 20 is 41%, and that's really projecting upwards. So I would say 41% is a conservative estimate of the increase in attendance with that program. So I did propose a minimal increase there to fund additional units for that subsidy. The other increase was to our bulk fuel. So we use bulk fuel for our transportation program. We operate a limited transportation program on our Cranberry Coach van, which takes people to grocery stores, the library, the family pantry, and to any and all COA programs that we offer. And that was just per the town administrator's budget directive of a 5% increase. I did make an attempt to offset some of those increases when I was proposing the budget, so a decrease to printing brochures that we use as advertising, other paid advertising through print or social media. I proposed a decrease to that. Decrease to postage was based just on actual postage figures. We didn't need quite as much as we were requesting. And then we tried to offset some of our other office equipment and supplies using grant funds that we receive annually. So even really with those decreases that I identified, I would say that would have an impact on services, especially with advertising and printing. But I did want to be mindful of the financial position of the town. That said, the the additional decreases suggested by administration would have a very significant increase on our operations. So if you'll give me just a few minutes to kind of talk about the impact of that. In the budget that was presented to you, the decreases were taken from salaries and wages, those two areas of wiggle room, the two-step increase for our van driver and the top step budgeting for our vacant position. So that was about $2,000 reduction. And then about $5,000 was taken from our expenditures from the Orleans Adult Day Health Subsidy. I went into, in the narrative I just gave to you, a bit of a description as to why I would not propose that the cuts come from those places if they are maintained. We have an intermunicipal agreement with the town of Orleans signed by the Board of Selectmen to provide that subsidy to Harwich residents. At the level of the cut that has been suggested, we would not be able to abide by that agreement if the current levels are sustained. So I would not suggest that the decrease come from that line item. I have identified other areas, again, if the full cut is to be maintained, where they should come from, and that's Appendix B in what I just handed out to you. Before I get into that a little bit, I would like to say I am requesting that the full amount that has been cut be restored. As many of you, if not all of you know, seniors are the largest segment of our population. It is over 50% of the year-round population of the town of Harwich. And we're seeing increasingly complex situations with seniors in our town. As you all know, I've been in this position for about 1.5 years, so I'm very new to this, but I'm grateful to work with people who have been doing this for a lot longer. I meet monthly at least with all of the other Council on Aging directors across the Cape. We have staff in-house who have been working in this department for a lot longer than I have. And the thing I hear the most often is, I've never seen anything like this before. We see people experiencing elder abuse, self-neglect, inability to find adequate caregiving, adequate in-home support, and just unable to kind of cobble together the resources that they need to live safely. And often other housing arrangements like assisted living facilities or nursing homes aren't financially tenable. So we're really just trying to provide wraparound services to people to keep them safe in their homes. And we're trying to reach as many people who can benefit from our services as is possible. So that said, going through kind of the cuts that I would propose if the cuts are maintained, I would reduce $1,100 from training and professional development. That would impact both staff and volunteers. We have about 90 active volunteers who do the work of approximately 3 full-time equivalent employees. Training for them would be focused on recognizing and responding to emergencies, recognizing cognitive and physical decline, and increasing awareness of both COA and community resources. So it would be a cut to that. Staff training would be in the area of technology. So I can admit, are one of the departments that needs some additional computer training to increase the efficiency of the services that we provide. So it would be at that cost, and then also for age and dementia-related training specific to staff. So that would be the impact of that cut. Printing, I would fully eliminate the budget for printing supplemental brochures. We do print a newsletter that we distribute to folks who sign up. I did include our most recent edition in the packet I distributed to you, but we're looking to really just any way that we can to get the word out about what we provide, the services that are available, how to get connected to them. So that would eliminate kind of the supplemental printing options available to us. Computer networking, $600. So we use a proprietary software system called My Senior Center. It's how we track program attendance, schedule transportation, track client notes for folks we're working with from an outreach or nursing perspective. It's been an invaluable resource to us since we implemented it in 2018, especially in terms of providing us with accurate statistics on program usage. Right now, folks do have to sign in using a little key fob, and the only place to do that is at the Council on Aging front desk. We do have programs all throughout the building, so we frequently miss folks who are signing in on the opposite side. They park on the opposite side, they go to their program on the opposite side, and they leave. And sometimes it's a choice not to come over, and sometimes people really are unable to travel that distance through the building. So we would like to be able to install additional scan stations, but this cut would eliminate our ability to do that. Advertising, this cut would be about 80% of our advertising budget. Again, one of our really primary goals is increasing awareness of the COA, and this would impact our ability to do that. Purchase services is how we pay for our special programming, so that's anything from entertainment and socialization, but also specialized programming that educates the public on legal documents, hearing loss, vision loss, really just any of the topics that we try to educate and inform folks about. So some examples of fiscal year 20 programs that we would be unable to duplicate are, again, our meal entertainment, holiday programming. We do things for Veterans Day, winter holidays. We have an upcoming St. Patrick's Day event, and educational programs as well. And then just some minor cuts to office equipment and office supplies to absorb the rest of the proposed cuts. Let's see, I think that about covers it.
Thank you for having us here today. Major consideration for older adults in our community, two major issues, transportation and isolation. And the cuts to this budget will impact both of those dramatically. And from the standpoint of the Council on Aging with our board here today, we are advisory. We're advocates for the community and for our director. And Emily has been exceptional in balancing her role to the needs of the seniors of this community and to your needs, both from finance, Board of Selectmen, and to the town administrator. And so she's put a wonderful set of where she would prefer to see the cuts if they were to happen. We, as the Council on Aging, would prefer that she does not have to do that, because these cuts impact the most vulnerable members of our community. I have a unique position, both being involved with the Council on Aging and the Board of Assessors. So I see the requests that are coming in for senior tax credits and for hardship exemptions from some of our seniors who cannot afford to pay their basic taxes. These are the people who are using the services of the Council on Aging. So I am here with my board today to ask for you not to get into the cuts that Emily has suggested, but is to restore them, because this budget impacts people, the largest group of people in this community. And she wants to be the good soldier and do what you have requested in your budget message. And as the interim town administrator's job is to see that that's carried out. This impacts people, and we're asking you to restore these potential cuts to this budget. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Richard. Is it your turn this time? Your turn? Finance Committee's turn this time?
Yeah.
Cool. You got it.
Can we do it? All right.
No
Mark?
questions.
Brian?
I don't have any questions. I have to tell you, I have two mothers-in-law that you are describing perfectly, and your services are amazing. I can understand how you feel those cuts are draconian. I know how important it is to the elderly in the community, so I think you do a great job.
Thank you.
I have no questions for you.
John?
Just one quick question. On the Orleans Adult Daycare Program, on your sheet here, is a unit a person?
It's a per person per day. So some folks attend many days, some folks only attend once. So per person per day.
So if I see like July, 42 units, what is 42 units? It means 42.
42
It
attendances.
could be one person 42 times.
It
or
could be.
42 people
Exactly.
one time.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that sounds like a great program. I didn't even know it existed within your organization.
And it's a program that we outsource.
Yeah.
It's not a program that we do that we would have to hire staff for to make it available to our members of our community. So it's an outsource that is much more cost-effective than us trying to run that program in-house.
But
And
do
it's
we-
life-changing for people.
But do we drive people there, though, or?
We do not drive people there, so folks do provide their own transportation.
Okay, no, I think it's just, I didn't know it existed for one thing, and your explanation, reading about it, sounds like it's great.
We're very lucky to
Great
partner with
service you
Orleans for
offer.
that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What is the total dollar level between the two plans?
It's about $7,000.
$7,000 for the Council on Aging is kind of a number that we should be able to find someplace. I would think. Where, I don't know, but we gotta find it.
Dana?
That was my question, what was the total? Thank you.
Tom?
I'm good, thank you.
I'm a president of the Friends of the Harwich Council on Aging, but right now I'm going to just talk about seniors. We help Emily feed seniors, get around the community, drive to the grocery store, and all of that. Not because we want to just feel real good inside, but because this is so desperately needed, this kind of thing. And I don't know how to deal with reducing budgets on the backs of seniors. That's about as gentle as I can make that statement. 60% roughly are seniors in our community. And I can't imagine walking up to them and explaining to them what may happen, but that they need to start speaking out and coming to town meeting and so on. This is a serious situation, and we've got to find a way to help make things better. Many communities have tried. I'd like to be sure we're one of them that makes it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Steve?
First, I want to thank Emily for meeting with me the other day on the budget. And I have to reiterate, Richard, what you said, what an asset you have there. And just like at the library, although, you know, you could debate on the impact it has on individuals, the staff worked very hard to try to come back with a proposed budget if it had to happen. And that we appreciate greatly, because the tough thing for, I think, and I won't speak for both of them, Joe and Carol, is, you know, they were given a charge by the selectmen, and they went out and just tried to set up how we would begin to approach this and look at it. I think it's really important that you're here today, and that a lot of the individuals who are on the board are here today, because it gives everyone a chance to see just how important the Council on Aging is. Not that we don't all know already, but I think it just brings more clarity for people who are looking to figure out what is it we can do in this budget process. And this appears to be one of the areas that, you know, clearly we need to, one, look at because it's so important, but two, protect because it's so important. So I'm sure as we sit and debate over where we can make changes, we're listening very closely to what you've had to say. So, and I really appreciate all the time you spent with me the other day. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to make it up to Stephen now.
You better.
Emily knows I've been involved for about the last 8 years with an organization that deals with low vision and blind individuals. Almost 100% of them are elderly by definition. I'm with Jack or Richard. If you don't wind up paying attention to this, it becomes an egregious problem. There are problems of isolation, depression. We don't have the most robust transportation system in the entire world, and the hub of activity and the focus of a lot of their lives is going into the community center and being with each other in various ways, programs or volunteering. There are things that are needs and there are things that are wants. In my mind, this is on the need part of the ledger. So if we can find the money somewhere else to offset this, it would be really important to me and probably all of everybody sitting up here.
Michael?
Thank you, Richard, and to the rest of the board. Thank you, Emily. Thanks for spending the time with me last week as well. This really is a non-thinker for me. I think that we just find the money and restore the 6,800, so I'd support it 100%. One of the ones I walked in here today knowing that we could not live without, in my opinion, with the seniors, with the aging population in town. And remind the boards and the Finance Committee that when Judy stepped down and Emily took over, there was quite a pay reduction from what Judy was being paid to what Emily's being paid. Emily puts a lot of time into this job, and the town's got a bargain there. So I think it's more than paid for itself, this $6,800. I support it.
We have the charge in front of us, so we'll continue the discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for
And Carolyn's paying for it.
We didn't say thank you.
Take it out of the pool budget.
She gifted it.
She willed it.
Put it on him.
Before I lose control,
He'd be using
on
my
to
sign.
recreation, Eric?
I didn't count for having visitors.
Yeah.
Everybody. Eric Beebe, Recreation Director. So I'll go through the questions here as well. The differences in the budget from last year and this coming fiscal year are our salary and wages for both seasonal and year-round is down 0.5% decreased. Our expenses have stayed level funded, and there is one line item that's a capital expense. That's $12,000 for White House Field lights maintenance. That's been removed. So that brings our total budget to a decrease of 2.63%. And the decrease in the salary and wages is mostly from seasonal, it varies year to year, but based on the number of beach days that we have this upcoming summer, as well as turnover in staff. We have a lot of older staff aging out, so we're going to have a lot of younger people in, which means they'll be on the lower steps. So those are our reasons for increases and decreases. I believe the $12,000 line item I brought up is being transferred over to the Highway Department for now, so they could spend it directly when it's needed on the bulbs. But we do anticipate that would, I believe, eventually be removed entirely, now that CPC has approved money for new lights at White House Field. We are not adding or reducing any personnel or hours. Our top budgeting priorities are just to keep our services that we provide constant and, give us room to grow wherever we see fit, whether it's athletically, other recreation activities through maintenance of our beaches, parks, fields. There really aren't any expenses that could be deferred at this time without impacting the services directly and what we offer at the moment. Our revenue for this upcoming fiscal year is anticipated at just under $460,000, and that is with no pricing or fee changes in general fund fees. We're also not recommending any change in our revolving fund status, and I believe that's all the questions, and I'd be happy to answer any you might have.
Okay. We'll start with Michael, I'll start with you.
I think, just back to the 12,000 capital
Sure.
outlay, you took that out of your budget and put it into the DPW budget?
It's in DPW, yes.
So the $4,000 reduction we saw from Link today is off of that 12,000?
Right.
Okay. And then, just on the gymnasium at the cultural center.
Yep.
You have full control over that?
No, we book it through Carolyn.
You book it through
Yep,
Carolyn?
yep.
Most everything that's booked in that gym is booked by you?
Yes.
Okay, and where does that revenue go?
The revenue for, say, pickleball, that's our biggest thing that's over there. That goes into the rec revolving fund, except for a percentage of each registration goes into the cultural center fund as well.
And do we have those two numbers? If you don't have them today, can you get them to me?
Sure, yep.
And then, actually, just a breakdown of the revenue that comes out of the gym, what the cultural center gets, and what the rec gets.
Yeah, got it, yep.
Thank you. Nothing else.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was pretty much what I was going to ask is, I'm interested in if somebody's using a facility, how much they're getting for the use of the facility. I mean, I understand the program's being run, but it shouldn't be handled the same way as if it were in the community.
No, yeah, we pay, like I said, a percentage when we use the cultural center for a program.
Thank you.
Yep.
Steve?
I'm good, thanks.
I'm good. Jack?
I'm almost set.
I'm set.
Dana?
All set?
Angelo?
Eventually.
Don?
I'm fine too. So actually, one question. You do quarterly reports on the number of participants in your programs?
We
and
do have
revenues
reports. I could send those all out to you.
Those, but do those come out of the selectman's office? I mean, the town administrator's office, or whose office do they come out of?
It would go to the town administrator's office.
Town administrator's. Okay. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, Eric, excuse me, if you could send that to us, that'd be
Sure.
good.
Yeah,
Brian?
absolutely.
I have no questions.
Mark? You?
Okay, nope. Thank you, Eric.
It's quick.
Thanks,
Really, yeah. Thanks for hanging around.
we can do, cut them all.
Sheila, you're up.
This is another list.
Hello,
How you doing?
gentlemen and Carol. I'm Sheila House, a Harwich Youth Counselor, and I'm here to request that the budget be level funded. Right now, there's a proposed cut of about 20%. The budget's been level funded for the past 4 years, except when I had to buy a new love seat and chair for the office, which was almost 20 years old. This is also the first time I've ever come before the Finance Committee or the board to defend the budget in 19 years, so good for me. There's no staff being added because this is a department of one person, and the items are 5 line items that have pretty much stayed the same over the past 19 years. Part of it is for professional supervision, which, because my boss is the town administrator, they wanted me to have a clinical supervisor in place that knew about therapy. Cell phone, which sort of speaks for itself. Office supplies, which is just a variety of stuff that I need for that, that one I always go right up to the top of. Continuing education, which I need to take workshops and trainings to keep my license. I have to be licensed to do my job. And then the last one is sort of a mixed one, and it involves memberships to 2 professional associations. Most of the department heads have affiliations with associations, so these 2 in particular, I actually resigned from one of them to save money last year, but stayed with the American Counseling Association and the Massachusetts Mental Health Association, because I get so much mileage out of, what's going on in the legislature, current trends in counseling, and a lot of research on anxiety, suicide, depression, and substance abuse. The mileage that I put in for is just for off-Cape, which is only a couple of times a year. I typically use my car around the Cape about 2,500 miles of the year, and I don't put in for mileage for that. So, additionally, I have been doing a lot of grant writing over the years for the town to save the school money, to bring programs there. And got grant funding for the Girl Power Intergenerational Mentoring Program, which the selectmen are familiar with, especially Don. And I have about 5 members of Girl Power back behind me. Raise your hands. It's a great program, and it's about to expand because WeCan wants to try to introduce Girl Power in both the 6th and 10th grade, as well as the 3rd grade, which is the program we do now. And the Albro House, one of the ways that I think I've helped financially as well is that the Albro House was empty for, except for me, for about 8 years of the 19 years I've been there. And since they started working on fixing it up a little bit more, I've gotten tenants over there which pays for the utilities and the insurance and stuff. So that's, I think it more than pays for it, actually. So. This is Jeff Craig, who is one of my amazing parents. The Harwich Youth Services Committee is now almost all parents, which is really wonderful because they have great ideas and kids in all the schools. So they've been helping me out a lot. So you might have questions for him too. But basically, I would really appreciate it if the $825 was put back in the budget again. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Mr. Chairman, if I may just remind everybody that this morning I handed out, it's a 2-part item. There's an email that has my name on it, and below that is a letter of support from the Harwich Youth Services Committee in support of our youth counselor. So you do have that in your packets, but not in the packet. All right. Thank you.
Feel the same way about this as I did Council on Aging. It's $825. If we can't find it, we can take it out of my paycheck. Yes.
That's after your paycheck.
That's right. I'm okay with that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do want to elaborate a little bit because they're a little too modest here. I remember the program, when it was a riff off of Arlington when it first got founded. And that was off of a spate of suicides in the town. Really important to be able to intervene before it becomes a huge, major problem with kids. And the Girl Power program, without making it half a joke, it's actually extremely important because most of the problems after you got past the suicide problem that existed back then resided with poor choices that girls were making based on what guys were manipulating them into, and the idea of the girl power and empowering them to be able to make good choices and not be maneuvered into things is really important. It's just super important. The fallout of that, if that doesn't occur, is much greater than the amount of money that we put into this.
The latest youth risk behavior survey that they did last year too, that there was a higher than normal instance of binge drinking among young girls and depression, so it's even more important now.
So I thought, I mean, from personal experience, it was a terrific program. It was great to have solid mentors, and that's the kind of program that you're probably not going to see the full results for like 10 or 20 years ultimately.
Well, the upside of a difficult budget is that we get to see just how valuable some of these assets of the town are to us, and why we all need to understand the importance of it. I agree with Michael and Dawn on finding a way to make sure that we make you whole in this, but I would emphasize again that the process that Joe and Carol have gone through is not a process where they were trying to pick out certain departments and, put the foot down on them. It was just a process that we had defined for them, that they, in their role, did in a way that allows us, I think, to really look at where we are in the town, where each department is, and in this case, we recognize even more today how your value is to the town. So I would agree with Michael and Don that we'll find a way to try to make this whole.
We're in agreement, so we'll move on.
Ditto.
Declare victory.
Tom?
I'm in agreement. Mike should pay for it. Michael?
Cross my palm with silver. Thank you.
Dana?
All set?
John?
All set?
Angelo?
You had to step out.
Ryan?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Joe, I guess we're up to you now.
Mr. Chairman, before I get to the administration budget, what you'll find on page 32 in your books, I did receive a text about 20 minutes ago from our Director of Golf Operations, who's on his way back. So if he comes in during my presentation, I'd like to yield my time to him so he can get back to where he is, because that is above and beyond the call of duty based on how his day has gone. So if you look at page 32 of the budget book, no, I'm in the wrong place, sorry. 32? Sorry, that is the right page. What you're looking at there, you can see, really, I'll defer commentary on the taxes. If you look at the expenditure categories, we're at, personnel is at 1% reduction. That's because we're able to hold the line on salaries because just about everybody in administration is interim, so it's easy to do that. Operating expenses, if I recall correctly, what the increase is related to is legal advertising and other activities that have been dispersed amongst the departments. That's going to be taken under within the administration department. I think if you look at the overall line item budget for administration proper, it's under the 2%. But I'm going completely by memory. page 72 will be the line item budget for administration proper. So actually, the expense category there is an increase of 18.3%. Capital outlay expenditures that were there previously are level funded, and previous years dealing with union contracts is not incorporated there. So the overall net budget is at a 1.9% increase.
Joe, what goes into operating expenses for the administration?
Well, like I say, off the top of my head, we've obviously got supplies like everybody else does, but it's a bigger part of the legal advertisement and advertisement for RFPs, anything to do with procurement and things of that nature. I'm also going to slightly turn to my left and see if the finance director can bail me out beyond that.
No, that's correct. I mean, the large majority of that increase in expenses is related to advertising.
Okay. Now, Steve,
I've talked to Joe and Carol so much that I think I'm okay.
Where are you?
Yeah.
okay. Don?
Other than a note that someday we're gonna look seriously at how we do our legal services. I have nothing else to say, but I mean, that number just keeps growing. There are other ways of doing it other than just contracting the whole amount out.
Michael?
I'd agree with Don on legal, but I'm fine with this budget.
Okay. Jack, I'll go to your group.
Mark?
No questions.
Brian?
No question.
Don?
No question.
Angelo?
Nope.
Dana?
No.
Tom?
I'm good.
I'm all set.
Okay, I think that's done. Then, Joe, I still up to you in operations?
It's not 23 yet.
It's not what?
It's quarter to
So,
3 yet.
Mr. Chairman and members, my understanding of ops and all others was related to any other departments that were not already heard from, if they wanted to present. So you can see the gentleman in the back with the big smile on his face, that's our town engineer. This would be his opportunity. By the way, he's been here since dark 30, so.
Yeah, I was gonna put him on the spot, so.
Well, I was interested in the process, so I wanted to sit through the day to hear all the presentations, so thank you for hearing mine, and I'll keep it short. I know you've had a long day. On the surface, the numbers don't look great, but I just want to defend the reason why there shows a 22.3% increase in the expenses. And that increase is purely regulatory. We are in fiscal year 21, we will be in year 3 of the MS4 permit, which is Municipal Separate Storm Sewer Systems. And basically, the first 2 years require planning and a little bit of engineering, and then years 3 through 5 require implementation, which means putting some stuff in the ground, infrastructure construction. So the first 2 years were about $31,000 in external services for the MS4 program. This next year will be $50,000, so it's an increase of about $19,000. If you net out that increase, it's actually a 2% decrease in the expenses overall. So aside from the regulatory requirement that we have to do through the EPA and Department of Environmental Protection, Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, I've done my best to reduce my budget. There have been some changes, as you know. This is my first time here, so the engineering department has turned over. We have upgraded some software. We had some antiquated software that had been used for many years, but we're trying to get up with industry standards. So we did upgrade some software, which was a new expense, but we tried to offset that with some other reductions. We do also, the engineering department also pays for the maintenance of the large-scale plotters that we have upstairs in community development, one of which is becoming obsolete, so the maintenance costs have increased. So that's something we're going to look at replacing in the future, but not in this year because of the fiscal climate that we're in. With that, like I said, I want to keep it short and sweet, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. And thank you for your time.
A couple of quick comments. One is that engineering has picked up much larger role in our wastewater discussions, phasing and plotting to, which has been time-consuming. Also, with Joel and Carol, have picked up a much greater role in the procurement activity. They've added a lot to their work, and
There was some expense
appreciate
added for
that.
continuing education for procurement as well in the budget.
We're waiting for golf. I'll whine a little bit because as a community, we have to comply with MS4 requirements. What I'm whining about is that the state does not, which is a, which I
The
hate.
state is slowly
They exempt
starting to.
themselves, So the DOT doesn't have to meet the same standards that they're forcing us to meet, which I hate to hold a grudge, but okay, I do.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Jack, I'll turn it over to you.
Hard to top you.
Yeah.
Mark?
Questions?
Brian?
Just a quick,
John.
you may have said it,
Sure.
Griffin, but I was trying to find your budget here. That the major increase for your expenditures is attributable to what?
Regulatory, the
Regulatory.
MS4 requirement.
Okay.
It's an increase of about $19,000 from the previous year for implementation of that.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you. Happy New
Okay.
Year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Brian,
Welcome.
Angelo,
Hey, thanks, welcome.
All set?
Dana, Tom,
Good to go. Thank you.
Larry?
I'll start with you, Steve.
Appreciate your reducing your budget aside from the regulatory requirements, and you know, you're doing a great job. Thank you.
Keep clear.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If, one of the advantages of actually going through this endeavor is not just for the money, but it's for show and tell. And with, given that, on a fairly recent line of major upgrades here, starting at this table with Carol and Joe, it's been your arrival, it's been terrific. You're a great addition.
Thank you for saying that.
Dana?
The politician is here for the show and tell. We're here for the money.
You were the politician
Michael.
before any of us here were.
Thank you, Griffin. The engineering department lost the surveyor. Where's the surveying? How much surveying are we contracting out now versus what we were doing before, and where would that show up in the budget?
The surveying, there's an expense of about $20,000 for contracting out survey. We have not used much of that yet this year. I do have some projects lined up that I'm going to send out for bid in the next couple of weeks to start to go into that.
And that's in your budget?
That is in my budget, correct.
Thank you, that's all.
Thank you, Griffin.
Thank you all.
Mr. Chairman, before anyone gets too relaxed, no, you're all set, but thank you, Griff. The finance director has a few other, all others to talk about under this
Okay.
header as well. So-
Great, Carol?
Included in the operating budget, as you're all aware, is a section for the school districts. And so Monomoy Regional School District has a draft budget here with a 2.62% increase. That increase is based on the assessment for student enrollment, and that enrollment has increased in Harwich. Then the Cape Cod Technical High School budget is here. It represents a 24% decrease. That decrease is also due to enrollment. I believe that Harwich lost 10 students at that high school. So the overall increase for educational assessments is a 0.46. But if you want to look at it separately, which you probably do, I wanted to provide that information. That information is on page 43 of your book. And then in addition to that, there may be a very small reduction, budget reduction coming forth from Monomoy. And it would be about, you know, the town's assessment of 73 or 74% of a figure of about $90,000. So it's a small amount, but it may help you add back some of these items that you so desperately need.
Did you say 90 or 9?
90.
Harwich's portion about 70.
About 70 is our portion?
Yes.
About 74% of 92,000 expected.
Yeah.
The school, the regional school committee is coming in on March 16th in joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen. They will, as a school committee, they will be voting their final budget number on the 12th, and as the superintendent reminded me, the timing still works out well because their budget can be reduced it cannot be increased, and I told them that would be helpful, because there are no plans to increase it on the 16th. But they are scheduled to come before the Board of Selectmen in joint meeting on March 16th.
And where is the meeting that you referenced on the 12th? Is that gonna be here?
No, that, the 12th is the Regional School Committee. I believe they meet at administration.
I think they may move it around. The last
Yeah.
time I was at one of their meetings, it was at the library at the high school.
But, when are they meeting with us, Joe?
Monday, March 16th.
March 16th is when they're coming in.
Because I know some of us are already feeling angst about the numbers and whatnot, so want to find a way to wrestle that some more.
Yeah.
We can get the information of exactly what time they're meeting and where they're meeting for
Okay.
you on the
Yeah,
12th.
good.
Okay, Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's really important, because on the one hand, the proportion has changed, so that we have a higher proportion of students, but their enrollment is stagnant. It actually went down. So if you're looking at it, if you're looking at it overall, we didn't reduce their budget. I mean, it's just a lower percentage of increase than it's been for essentially the same student body. So I'm real interested in knowing what the baseline is for them, because that's an area that did increase, and it increased a little above what we were talking about.
Is that it, Carol?
This one
So,
here, Dana.
Moving on to one other
Excuse me,
subject. Oh,
a question.
Just on the schools, 2% for them is $600,000, and we're talking about nickels and dimes here compared to that, and all the departments that are giving up to support that increase there, basically. $100,000 swing solves all the little problems we heard today in terms of all the things that are important to the rest of the town. And we've played that game since this school started, as far as what do we strip away from the town in order to fund this important education we have. But at some points, you have to push back a little bit.
I'm still waiting
Some
for
of the
last
stuff that
year's
we've had
request
tonight.
for what the overhead of the organization is.
Okay,
Carol?
that's my comment.
The other areas in the budget that we haven't talked about yet are employee benefits and debt service, and things like general insurance, property and liability insurance, and those items. For Barnstable County Retirement, the assessment for the town of Harwich next year is a 4% assessment increase. In addition to that, we had great news on health insurance for active employees at a 0% increase. That's the second year in a row. For retired employees that are on supplemental plans, that increase is coming in at 3% increase. We have smaller increases with regard to some of our general insurance increases. We have, as you're aware, the town supports veterans assessments and the support of veterans. That's coming in at just over a 2% increase. And then, of course, we have debt service. Debt service, we've got some debt that's falling off. That's debt associated with CPA debt. We just talked earlier today about Witchmere Pier. That debt is falling off this year, so we see a reduction in debt of about $650,000 in the upcoming budget.
Did you mean to say CPA debt, or did you mean land bank debt?
Land bank debt.
Thank you. It's important.
Thank you. And then we have the support of the Sewer Enterprise Fund. We're proposing the support of that fund. It's fully supported by taxpayer revenue and by free cash. We've allotted $250,000 in free cash to support Sewer Enterprise Fund, with $100,000 coming directly from taxpayers or the tax levy. And if you recall, the sewer fund budget The sewer fund budget is set at $376,000. So what I just gave you as a funding source totaled $350. We're gonna need $26,000 in retained earnings from the sewer fund, from amounts that have been appropriated this year and last year, to support next year's budget. We did not estimate any user fees at all yet to support the '21 sewer enterprise budget.
Where are we on stabilization fund, funding and so on?
The stabilization fund, the balance in the stabilization
Yeah,
fund?
and what do we put in the budget for next year?
I'll look that up.
Yeah. I'm losing this battle, and I'm not happy.
But you
So-
ask it consistently.
Yeah.
We're estimating a $4.4 million balance in the stabilization fund. We're estimating a $3.3 million balance in OPEB for fiscal year '20, the end of this fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Joe? I see we have Roland has joined us. Want to talk about, you're up.
Did I hear her right?
We appreciate the effort coming back, given what you were dealing with, so.
Yeah.
Roland, thank you very much for making the extra effort.
Oh, thank you, I appreciate you scheduling. I'll make this pretty brief, I know it's been the end of a long day for you. I've got a, brief golf department, oh, by the way, I'm Roman Greer, the Director of Golf in Town of Harwich. And I've got a brief, budget narrative being passed around. I'll go over that quickly. The golf course continues to see an increase in facility usage as the golf department once again hit a high watermark in revenue in FY19 at just under $1.9 million. With 1,149 members and over 15,000 non-member rounds of golf per year, Cranberry Valley remains the busiest 18-hole golf course on the Cape. The popularity of the golf course brings many challenges. I'll jump down to the challenges of our budget. Anticipating the needs and maintaining a 190-acre property with an 18-hole golf course, 2 maintenance buildings, a cart barn, a clubhouse, a practice facility, a cart fleet, and a maintenance fleet. Appropriate staffing levels to facilitate golf course operations with a focus on customer service and high-quality golf course conditions. Reliance upon and administration of many technical services such as point-of-sale systems, online tee time management, website, automated irrigation system, tournament software, and web-based marketing. And as we all saw with the tornado last year, the flexibility to react to weather conditions and their challenges associated. You never remembers the tornado, but we deal with varying weather conditions and challenges every year. On the next page, I have the standard budget questions. In general, if I just want to summarize those, we're requesting no additional funding for any of our line items other than contractual salary obligations and an anticipated increase in utilities. We did have the retirement of one employee this year that brought down some of our employee lines such as longevity and seasonal salary and wages as we distributed her duties. So in general, we're looking for a 0.62% increase over the FY20 budget. As far as jumping down through some of the standard questions, there's a question, could anything be deferred? At this time, there are no expenses that could be deferred without negatively impacting the golf facility. We did reduce our budget last year by $30,000 as the direction of the town administrator. We brought line items that we weren't reaching the spending threshold down to actual numbers. So there was a reduction last year. And then under number 6, the recap of revenues anticipated and their sources. That number has been adjusted down based on the tornado and the closure while we had tornado cleanup. Number 7, the price and fee changes. Very simply, in December of 2019, the selectmen approved our recommendations to increase all adult memberships by $20 and to increase the Chatham resident memberships by an additional 25. There was a desire, I don't know if you remember the meeting last year, to create a little separation between Chatham and Harwich. And then we also created a new membership category, collegiate, just to address a age group that we were not really engaging. And, if any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mark?
No questions.
Brian?
I have one question relative to the snack bar concession, which I assume is the restaurant.
Yes.
So you get just simply a flat $15,000 fee for the summer for the rental of that space?
There's a rent, currently, the rent is $12,000 this year. We're on a 2-year extension to what was an original 3-year lease, and it's just a straight number, yes.
So they don't pay any percentage of
No,
the
no
revenue?
percentage, no.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
John?
Hi, Roman. I got a couple questions here. I did meet with Roman earlier, and we went over a couple things. I'm very pleased to hear that the golf cart barn has remedied itself with the electrical connection there, that the town was looking at almost a $250,000 addition there, but you were able to work that out at zero cost to the town, which is commendable.
All right, thank you.
The tornado damage, you sustained a tremendous amount of damage out there, but through insurance and due diligence of your own employees, you almost came out whole through that whole thing with revenues and stuff. The last one, which I know folks don't like to discuss, but I like to bring it up because I feel it's an important one to bring up, is the membership rates at the club. I know that you've increased the Chatham residents by $25. Previous to that, Chatham residents paid the same in-town rate as Harwich residents.
Correct.
Of $810. There are presently 185 Chatham residents paying basically an in-town rate. And I think, while $25 is commendable, I think it should be raised much more. And whether or not you want to do that in increments over a period of time or all at once, it doesn't really matter to me. But I feel Chatham should be paying a lot more than $25 a season there, over there. We talked about a lot of budgets here. They were looking for $600,000, $700,000, or $6,000, $8,000 to balance out their budget. Just the rough numbers alone, if Chatham residents were paying the same the same rate as a non-resident, the town would make about $51,000 off of that increases on membership. And as far as Orleans and Eastham, you raised the rates on them, I think, $20?
They followed the same as Harwich. All memberships went up $20.
$20.
So there's a $100 separation between Harwich and Eastham and Orleans memberships.
Correct. And that's 41 memberships, 41 people that take advantage of that from Eastham and Orleans. And that would bring in, if they paid out-of-town rates, non-resident rates, that would bring in $8,200. So if you add those, 51 and 8,000, you're coming up close to $60,000. That would cover a lot of those budgets here, discrepancies we talked about earlier. Not only that, if you wanted to put it towards a police car, that would take care of a police car. I know I've heard lots of excuses or lots of reasons why it's not being charged. That's fine. But I think this should be looked at and more serious than it is. And I feel that Chatham residents should be paying non-resident rates. We do reciprocate, Chatham does reciprocate with us with their 9-hole course, but I'm not a golfer. And from the golfers I do talk to, it's no comparison between that course and your course. It's one of the best courses on the Cape. And I did some quick analysis of 2 neighboring towns, Dennis and Brewster. Brewster charges $1,800 roughly for a non-citizen at their courses. And Yarmouth charges $1,200. Now, both those towns have 2 courses. I understand that, but you can only play one course at one time. So I think we should look at that, like we should look at, in my opinion, look at this uncollected property tax. It's 2 avenues of getting revenues very easily without a lot of extra work. So thank you, Roman, again. You did a tremendous job out there, and I applaud it. And we also talked about your photovoltaic array too with the solar, which sounds almost a net cost to the town on that for electricity too, which is very commendable. So thank you.
Thank you.
Angelo?
I'm partially responsible, if not totally responsible, for Chatham paying the same price
You stand up when you say that.
as Harwich. And it was done a number of years ago with the goal of being able to pick up that 9-hole course for us to work on and do other various things. They were going to supply things. Things occurred in the people, both our people, our professional, and Chatham people, and that had died off. So, and I know there's been several attempts by the golf committee to try and straighten that out again. And it hasn't worked so far. But I think one thing you're forgetting is, if it's still true, a lot of the Harwich players are not reappearing each year. And one of the things that we don't want to do is drop the total number of players, because that gets to be very expensive. But go examine it, but I'm to blame.
We did decrease a little bit last year in Harwich residents, and Chatham residents are our fastest growing.
That's the problem.
Fastest growing, not decreasing, growing.
Dana?
I'm all set. My discussion was with those two.
No, I'm good.
Ask him.
My golf days are over.
Okay, Don, I'll let you start.
Yeah, I'm just going to remind everybody, the fees have to be, it's nice looking at other towns, and it's nice saying that you should charge these guys more than that. They still have to be tethered to your expense structure. It's a lot more complicated than we can get into here, because you're talking about what your max out rate is, how many members you're going to have, and in 2 courses, I could argue that Brewster would be able to make the point that you're amortizing the cost of 2 operations into their fee structure. Even though you can only play 1 at a time, they still have to both be available. So you have to operate them and maintain them. I'm sure that's how they're able to rationalize their fee up.
Steve?
Thanks for the great job you guys do. I mean, it's just a great golf course and managed exceptionally well. I do think the discussion that takes place, John bringing up what you said, is it just brings to life more and more the fact that there are some areas that we can search, whether it's in the golf course or somewhere else, to make up for the areas that we really shouldn't cut. So, you know, you just being an example, not necessarily the source, but thanks again for all the great work you guys do.
Great job, Roman. And I think my point is the same as Stephen and Don's. We can't raise your rates to buy a police car. You're a self-sustaining department, and we're not allowed by state law to just raise money in golf to buy anything else. So I do remember lots of discussions about raising the rates for Chatham when I was the liaison to the golf committee. But I think at the time, the consensus was that we were afraid we were going to lose membership and not be a self-sustaining. So certainly something to continue to analyze, as John says, but you're self-sustaining and you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I can only reinforce that. At present, we can't take golf and move it into the general fund to pay for other activities just by legally.
John?
Nice job.
Just one quick question. I agree, I was just using the police car as an analogy. But anyway, just to clarify one statement, is Harwich increasing membership or decreasing?
Last year, Harwich, the number of Harwich residents decreased a small amount. And we do have, one thing we're looking into, we have an older membership, so every year people age out of golf. And that's one of the things we're trying to tackle with all of our youth player development and engaging of families with the collegiate rate and things like that. But last year we did decrease in Harwich, the number of Harwich resident members.
Okay, thanks, Roman.
Actually, did. Okay. Well, thanks again.
Thanks, Roland. Thanks for coming back.
A great job. Joe, anything else? Or if not, we'll...
Well, if I just, some final thoughts before we end this session. First of all, thanks to you all for giving up your day to be here. And obviously, thanks to all of our department heads, not just for spending their day here today, but the way in which they've gracefully and eloquently articulated their commitment to their program and their department. And as was said before, we have an exceptional team here, and we have an exceptional team throughout the town, through our department heads, they were given a very difficult process, and they rose to the challenge. And to transition from that comment, I would just remind everybody that we had these difficult conversations today because we were at $1.8 million deficit. And I didn't state it at the outset, I stated it earlier when I talked about my budget message generally, but I went through a simple and rudimentary exercise of looking at any budget that was more than 2%, and by and large, stayed away from their salary and wages, and then had the intent of impacting upon their expenses. Now, part of the reason why I did that was I was mindful that many of those salary and wages had just been negotiated in good faith, and the increases that were there, while we can cut because we don't have appropriation, there was an exercise that already went through. I bring that up because I want to tell this board and the Finance Committee that as we begin collective bargaining negotiations going forward, I can't lose sight of the fact that we were dealing with a $1.8 million deficit. Now, that is not entirely on salaries and wages in any way, shape, or form, but it comes into play. But one thing I want to have bear out is that we have a balanced budget presently. We know we may have opportunities to restore some of the departments that were impacted greater than others, or programs that were impacted greater than others. But the other effort was to the broader audience that is hopefully watching at home or will watch at some other point, and those are the folks that will show up on May 4th at town meeting. We've been doing the tough conversations. We've been going through very diligently to get to the budget to this point. And I want to put out there personally, and I'm going to take an opportunity to try and speak on behalf of the finance director as well, but she and I offered a dispassionate eye towards this budget because that's what was required. And I just want everyone to know that, personally speaking, we have our soft spots, but the exercise that we were put through is to give you folks a balanced budget. And so again, I'm hopeful that as we go through the month of March, before we finalize the warrant at the end of the month, we continue the dialogue and the discussion, because a budget is a reflection of the priorities of a town. Dispassionate cuts were made, but now passionate choices and proper choices need to be made, because a budget is our statement of our priorities as a community. So again, I want to thank everybody that has gotten us to this point today.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay, Dana?
Many of you noticed that I came here today. I was appointed
It's
late
hard-
yesterday
It's hard not to know this, Dana.
Did you? By the town moderator. He did get a legal opinion from KP Law as to the interpretation of the charter that would allow a municipal employee who's a part-time worker at the landfill to be a member. So I do have to step down on those items that have to do with highway, and I do publicly declare that. I have completed my ethics training, and I have been sworn in by the town clerk. But I just wanted to make a public statement today about the highway department. I do step down on those items, but I'm here for my 18th year on the finance committee.
I'd like to welcome Dana back to the fold.
So Brian's not the new guy.
Yeah, I'm the new guy now. I'm the new guy.
Everything is relative.
As I,
Meet the new boss, same as the old.
The new one's nice anyway.
excuse me, guys, it's,
Sorry, thank you. I won't take up much more of your time. While I was speaking about my budget, you had alluded to talking later. I didn't know if it was later today or at a later meeting about the shorebird monitor position or changing our revolving fund in wetlands to up that
the
annual
upcoming
amount.
selections meeting.
Okay,
Yeah.
just wanted to let you know, plovers arrive probably sooner than April 1st. We have no chance of hiring somebody before then, so that's going to have to, some way, Nikki and myself, the assistant agent, and myself are gonna have to absorb that. It is really of utmost importance that we get a monitor as soon as we possibly can.
We do have the ability, Joe, to put an emergency item on the agenda.
Well, I'll be speaking to the hiring freeze Monday anyway.
So we can, if it's that critical with Plovers, we can
Thank
look
you.
at that.
Yeah.
I unfortunately cannot be here on Monday evening. I have a doctor's appointment, but I trust that you will
Yeah, we can.
take care of it and discuss
Well,
it.
I would suggest that you send the chair an email with a board topic. I think we could wait one more week on this. And I think we'd be hard pressed to call this an emergency to the Attorney General, but
Yeah, 1
I'll
week
leave
is
that.
okay. Once we
week's
get more
okay.
into that, then it's harder.
And if you send a request, we can take it
If
up
we,
at our
if we
next.
see a pullover coming in, we'll make it an emergency.
Right.
For the same reason, okay?
Thank you.
Just to, just to finalize that, discussion, we'll be, discussing this meeting was for information gathering.
Understood.
We're gonna discuss it again on Monday. We'll discuss it the following week. Hopefully we'll get to, I'm hoping in 2 weeks we'll have a chance, or a week after next, we'll have a chance to vote on the budget. I know I've made some lists of things we need to bring up. I know, Michael, you've, emailed me, items that we need to get up as quickly, that we can, start to get at. I mean, I always have wastewater issues, but we have some others as well we should, talk about.
Thank you.
To the wastewater issues, though, just while we got the board still here and in session, you are going to be sending out the last final draft of
When I
DH1?
get home today.
Okay, because when I speak to the other town members on Monday, it's going to be relative
I'll do it.
to any of the input that the rest of the board has.
I'll do that. Okay?
Make
Hey, Tom, you're adjourned.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Second.
What helped you need cleaning up?
Thank you, James.